To play this amazing game, and with Thanksgiving right around the corner this week, just wanted to say thanks to everybody who spent some time on the channel and maybe learned a thing or two over the years. And even though Ludia and Jam City had some rough patches throughout, just thanks again for this game. I found a lot of enjoyment over it. And one of the things that I've been trying to promote with a lot of people, but we haven't been able to get through the best I and other people have been able to manage from the developers, is getting 100,000 gems and then the million gems when they announced the game was ending. It's sad because there's so many good pieces of gear that we'd never get to try out if they don't give it to us. They had a recent post within their comments on their social media that they may be able to give us something. I don't think it's going to be able to give us all max level 30 gear. But I just wanted to do a quick video and share everything with you of how our battle loadouts would change for me if they were to give us all 30 level gear. Because it would be pretty different for me, at least, of how it is now if everybody was on an even playing field. So in this video, I just want to go through all the different characters and show you how I would build them out for battle if everything was level 30. So we'll start with Coriolis. So if Coriolis was level 30, I'd still be using the legendary because it gives 50% chance to gain Fury. And the reason why I kind of shy away from this in battle is because her epic just has significantly more increase to stats. But now we're just having like stats out the door, so I would use the legendary pants there. Instead of using the common, then I would also use the legendary again, just to, in case if Coriolis can't move or disarmed or something, and then she can start giving buffs as well, which is very powerful. I would still be using the favorite tools. This is just because I like to give everybody the extra fortune on this turn. I think it gives a little bit more of an impact. You could also use the Masterworks tools, but I don't like this as much just because you have to be within 2 zones to use it. So if they push her back on her turn and you're also using the Ghost Lantern, then you won't be able to get that fortune on your turn. So it's a gamble. Either has their perks, but I would still be using the rare tools here. Weapon-wise, some people could use Coriolis as a damage machine, so they'll either be using the common wand of tinkering or they'll be using the epic orbs. I like to use her more as a defense and buff build, so I would be using the wand of essential adaptation with her. Going into armors, this would be the one time if everything was maxed out where you'd want to use your legendary armors, or just any armor you like, but I would use the legendary just to show them off because I think a lot of the legendary looks cool. And then with this build, just to increase how annoying she is, I would also use the Ghost Lantern. I have some strong opinions about the 80% death ward on this, but that is not going to be fixed, so I am just going to overpass that for now. Saarvin. How would I spec out Saarvin? Well, Saarvin's one of the characters where I have almost everything to level 30 with his common gear and his epic weapon and armor. And it works decently, but if I had the time and the resources and everything was level 30, I would spec him out a little bit differently than I do in battle. So I would be using his rare pants more often, so this would give him a chance to gain defense and an extra turn. It'd be helpful just to get him kind of into the back row. I would still be using the common hood, so nothing would change there. Whatever quiver I use, it would kind of depend. In battle right now, I use the common quiver just because it gives everybody a nice attack boost, because some of the heroes I have don't have a very high attack stat. I'm unsure whether or not I would use the common quiver or the rare quiver, so this would just be kind of up to the opponents I'm finding on that day, so it's kind of take your pick there. Weapon-wise, I'm still kind of unsure. If we start to think back kind of like to some of the Warrior Draft events, if everything is equal, the rare bow could be really good because it could take out the opponents on their turn. So I think personally I would either between the rare bow or continue using the epic bow, just because if we are starting to use the move back ability on his first turn, then we would need the 3 range, so it either between the epic bow or the teeth of the dragon. I personally kind of hesitate away from the teeth of the dragon just because it's a 50% chance to go off, where the epic is the 75% chance. Armor wise, it's pretty much your choice. As I said, it's aesthetic. I'm generally not a fan of the legendary armor on Saarvin. The front looks good, but the back is just kind of a little bit weak for me. I like the long cape in the back for this one. So I think I'd probably still keep the epic there, but again, just visual. And then also, depending on the people that I'm finding in battle, a lot of people like to use Nayeli with the owl, which increases miss. So having the Eyes of Thunder, the critical hit can go over and above the miss chance. So I generally use that if I find a lot of people in battle that have Nayeli. Or if I'm not finding, I would still continue to use the Seal of Guidance, which just maxes the amount of damage that Saarvin can actually deal. So it would be a toss-up between those two, just kind of being battle specific of trying to who you're finding in battle. Going to Shevarith, my build out would be a little bit different with Shevarith in battle. So I've been using the epic just because I have it maxed out and it's the biggest stat boost for me. A lot of people use the rare because it has a 75% to ready all abilities, but if you actually look at the legendary, it has a 5% more chance to ready all abilities, so I would actually be using the legendary here. This may surprise some people, but a lot of people in this category are either between the epic just because they have it the highest, or the common because it does the push and it has 125%, which is a decent amount of damage for her. But I'm not sure what the Silverhand Winter's Mask would actually do, but I do know at level 15 at least, all enemies in 2 zones are going to be pushed out to the side, dealing 75% damage. And this retreat is going to push Shevarith into the back row. This would be very key for her because when you have different row management on your team, it's harder for the opponent to decide whether or not if they would want to go after Shevarith now in the back row or your 3 other heroes in your front row. I think this would be very beneficial for her to use. So it gives people those options, spreads out your team, it makes her a little bit more safe. This would definitely make her safe from like Tommus moving into the front row attacking, and this would protect her for her second turn where she could use kill from the mage's grimoire and hopefully kill somebody and take them out and be a little bit safer doing that. Or depending on kind of what the opponent's looking at that turn, the weapon that we'd definitely be using is the Staff of the Fiery Wrath, and this is where she could start taking a bunch of people out and dwindling down their health from the safety of the back row. Armor wise, again, your choice. I think the legendary looks really good. I like the red looking cape, but then this also looks pretty good, so just take your pick. I'd probably just use the legendary just because they haven't been useful at all if they're not maxed out. And then coming over here, this would also be another interesting choice. So I would be stuck between a couple items. So you could go with the rare, which just give her a base increase to her damage, which would be good with Coriolis giving her fortune, because then on her turn she can guarantee either the kill or her weapon staff going off. Whereas if she has the fortune in the arcane dice, it's just going to guarantee that she gets this boost attack for 1 turn. The 1 turn can make a pretty big difference, but I think even more so, the Seal of Readiness, once you get this out to level the 16 ability, I believe it's a 40% chance to gain counterattack permanent. And that would be really awesome, seeing that if Shevarith's in the back row, most likely she's only be taking some like minor amounts of damage. So some of that damage won't kill her, and then she'll be able to counterattack the entire opponent. I think that would be really cool. But then on the counter side, if the opponent has Pikel with like Dominate, then this would also increase her chance of getting dominated because you can't pick and choose your opponents at this point. But I think in general, most of the time I would just be using this because I'm generally a quick kill player rather than a strategic move by move player. So that would be my loadout for Shevarith. Going into Tommus, I don't think this would really change too much from how I play with Tommus now, but I would still be using the Epic Warriors boots, or depending on if I'm not really sure how the game would play out too much if Tommus was level 30 along with everybody else. If I needed more defense, I could also use the Fox Paws, which would give him a good amount of defense as well. But for now, I would assume I would still play offensive, so I would be using the Warriors boots there. Helmet-wise, I'm still kind of unsure how I'd want to play with this. If everything was maxed out, I would kind of have to see. I'm not too sure what his captain's helmet would use, but generally the way I play, I don't want to push people in forward because I don't use a lot of close hero enemies where this would be useful. So this is a fun ability that I would use in challenge mode a lot, but I don't think I would use it in balance personally for my loadout. If you use like Naomlen, for example, or Joppa, that could be very useful to pull everybody forward so they don't have to move. But again, also depending on your playstyle. I think I may switch to the Guardian's helmet just because this does do a massive amount of damage. So if I want to try to take somebody out real quick, this may be one of the best options to go. But I'd still think I'd be between the Epic and the Common there. Going to the bags, also depending on kind of what the opponents I'm finding, I would probably either be using this heavy bag to increase his defense if I find out he's dying too fast, or I may even try to use his legendary bag, so this would give him counterattack, and with that counterattack, Tommus has a couple different weapons where he can gain counterattack. One of them would be this bag. The other option is his warrior's helmet. You generally don't want to double up depending on what you're using, so if I am using this legendary bag, I'd probably switch to the common helmet then. And then he can also gain 100% counterattack from his Fists of Rebuke. But over here, there are a couple good options. In battle, I like to use these bracers of defense just because it increases his survivability. So with Tommus, most of the time on his first turn, you're going to move him forward and either taunt or start attacking the opponent. But he can be very easily exposed if he doesn't have more defense increases. So like for example, if the opponent has Saarvin, they reduce his defense, move back, and then they can lash out an entire common hood against Tommus. He'll definitely die, but if he has the bracers on, he'll still survive that barrage. So it's definitely pick or choose on who you find. I know a lot of people like to have the restore because it pretty much makes him immune on his turn to missing or getting dominated. This could be very good again for a counterattack against Nayeli, but I would still have to find out personally. I would think I would probably still go with these epic bracers. Weapon wise, I would probably still stick. So Tommus, he can deal a lot of damage with his epic weapon, but I think the benefit of giving your entire team this 50% increase to defense is very vital. And then you can increase the amount of defense he gives depending on kind of your other load up. So you can increase it by having his bag off, his fox paws off, or his Eon Stone of Awareness, or as I like to use, the bracers of defense to give him that extra defense boost. It just makes him a lot harder to kill. So that's probably how I would load him out, switching between these two items there. Going into Calliope, I don't think I would probably change too much from what I'm using with Calliope now. I would still probably be using the Sailor's Boots because I just like the 75% chance that the damage goes off. I would still be using the Bard's Scarf because it gives her the extra turn after healing, which makes her very versatile. I would still be using the Charm and Loot to give the chance to dominate an opponent for 2 turns. Weapon-wise, I would think I would still probably be using the Common Rapier because I like how it attacks everybody and deals the good amount of damage. I may also think about the whole damage strategy, and if you'd be able to injure the opponent and have them die on their turn, I would think of, but I don't really know how that would play if everybody's level 30, if it would be able to take them out. I think it may be able to take out some of the purple heroes that you see, the mighty heroes. But I would kind of have to play test that, so I would still be between the common and the legendary item there. Armor, I would switch to legendary just because I think it looks a tad better than the epic. It's not really too different. But again, just being able to use level 30 legendary armor, aesthetically, I think it would look a little cooler. And then one of the other things that I would just change for her is I use the Eon Stone of Protection now just because it gives me the best stats on my team. And it does give a nice defense boost to your team randomly. But there's no doubt if everything was level 30, what you would be using is Squint because it can take an opponent out for 2 turns because they can't attack if they don't have restore ability. So that is absolutely major. But overall, the stat boost is just not worth it for me with her. Because as you can see how drastically the stats look between what I use and what I would use if everything was 30. That's how I build Calliope. Farideh, this would be very interesting. So I've been trying out a couple different classes with her with some of her items. And if everything was level 30, my build would look quite different. So a lot of people like to use the Explorer boots. It's good especially when you're attacking enemies that can dominate or enemies that have like a miss ability such as Nayeli. But I find that I like to play her more, moving her into the back row and reducing the opponent's attack, which makes them shoot kind of like peanuts and you can survive a lot longer. From there, then you have a couple different options. So I'd like to use the Dragon Cult Cubes, and this will just give Farideh a chance to really massively increase her damage stat. So on her turn, she can do massive damage and start to take people out. I would combine that with the Legendary Staff, which at 16 ability, it inflict 225% damage, and then also injure targets, and that'll last for 4 turns. I think that combination is absolutely deadly. So I would probably be using that if I was playing with her. There's another build that you can also consider, but let's consider this one first. So we're using the Legendary Staff, and we're using the Dragon Cult Cubes. We're also going to use the Legendary Armor, because honestly, look how good that looks. From here, you'd have to consider whether or not you want to take the risk of further reducing their defense stat or reducing their opponent's attack even more. So kind of up to you. You can use the Justice Boots to gain the counterattack, and then the Rare Headband to decrease the attack of the opponents there. Totally your choice, but I'm just going to reduce the defense over there and gain the reduced attack from the boots. And then with Farideh in the background, she's now 3 away from the opponent's starting line, so I think I'd probably use the Hellish Grimoire, or I would use the Book of Shadows just to give her another ability to heal, because I don't use a lot of healing abilities on my team, so I think this would be pretty fun to use and try out competitively. So that's one of the builds that I would use for her. The other one, which I've never been able to try, but I've definitely wanted to try, was make her a counterattack build. So we'd be using the Epic there. That would give her counterattack. I would be using the Rare here to reduce everybody's attack stats so they're not dealing as much damage. I would be using the Book of Shadows to give her some healing ability, because now we're going to be putting her on the front row to deal damage. And on the front row, what she's going to be counterattacking with is her Silverhand Sickle. And I can't show you here, but at level 16 ability, this is going to attack all the enemies in one zone, not just one. And it's also, the opponent can't heal, and any attack that you'll deal to the opponent will do a percentage more damage, and it lasts for 3 turns. So that could be absolutely crazy to deal. But again, I've never had the opportunity because I haven't been able to get this to level 16 ability, and it's just not as been competitive as some of the other weapons I've been using. And then over here, you just kind of want to gauge what you want to use. So if I am using this setup, I would probably have a more reflect damage build. So I'd use this kind of just to coerce people not to attack her, because if she has a reflect damage, that may kill them on their turn. So maybe she'll just start taking some passive damage instead of some active damage. Or I could definitely think you can increase her attack, because she has one of the lowest attacks for the people of her class, just because she's more of a damage focus instead of attack focused. But you just have to try that out. So those are the two ways that I would build her if everything was level 30. Halbenet, I don't think I'd really change anything over here. His best build, in my opinion, is using his rare, so he can start restoring all people. You'd still probably want to use the Moon Shroud to heal everybody. It has one cooldown, so every turn he can heal somebody. I would be curious to see what this Caretaker's Crown does at level 16 ability. If it heals all your allies within 3 zones for 50%, and it has the 2-turn duration with the cooldown for 2 turns, or 1 turn. I think that would be really cool, but I just don't know enough kind of how this works. The secrecy is really good because it'll protect the opponent from stealing some of your abilities and buffs that you have on. But I just don't know right now. I definitely would love to see some of these abilities, if they would love to gift us the ability to get everything maxed or give us some more gems. But definitely definitely guaranteed the Moonshroud Shroud is never a bad choice there. Coming over here, I would probably make a change. So sometimes Halbenet isn't able to move. He can become immobile, or you just don't want him to move. So I think this Talisman of the Moon would be another great option for him to remove debuffs that opponents give him. And the 20% block also could make a pretty big difference, and it lasts for 5 turns. So I think that could be a really cool item to switch out into battle. Weapon, there's really nothing you ever need to use. St. Markarvius Thighbone. This is one of the things I also wanted developers to change the ability onto, but nothing we can do about that now, so just spam the St. Markarvius Thighbone until the game ends, I guess. Switching into the armor, you'll definitely use that legendary armor. Look how big those shoulders are. You know, the bigger the shoulders, the more important the hero, right? And then coming over here, there's no other option. You're just going to use the Ring of Long Life. This is a very overpowered weapon. This is another one of the things I wanted the developers to change the ability on, but it's too late for now. So just spam the ring and have Halbenet keep healing himself massively when anybody attacks him. Going into Jarlaxle, this is one of the characters I wish I was able to play a lot more. Because if everything was maxed, he'd have some really fun builds, but a lot of his items that I'd want to use are legendary, and so it just doesn't really work out as well for me. So the boots you're going to want to use is always the eye catchers. This is the only boot option you'd ever want to use with him. Hat-wise, this is one of the areas where I'd be using a legendary, so I would move him into the back row on the first turn. I would use his legendary hat to increase his damage stat for 3 turns, and with that increased damage stat, on his second turn, I would use the portable hole, which is going to injure everybody 100% for 3 turns, and this is really fun whittling down everybody effect. His weapon, I would still probably be using the Brawler's Blades, because I like the 75% chance for it to go off, but I would experiment a little bit also with the Rare Braids, because this is his only weapon that can attack multiple people instead of just attacking one. The only downside is it's 50% chance, but it's your pick there. You definitely go for the legendary armor with him because it just looks so amazing. And then you'd have to experiment over here. Generally, with this build, I'd be recommending either you're going to use the common ring, which is going to restore, so even if he is attacking like a Nayeli or he does get dominated on his return, next turn all that clears away and can still attack. But also I found out that the Wand of Web could actually be really useful and fun as well, because it'll give a hero a miss, and it only lasts for 1 turn, which is pretty sad, but it can definitely be useful. It increased the survivability of Jarlaxle, so I'd probably still stick with that because I think it's a little bit funner. because even if Jarlaxle does have miss, this portable hole doesn't need in order to go off in order to get the injure effect. So I think that would be a pretty fun setup and for to use him. Joppa, his build wouldn't be too significantly from how I use it now, so I would still be using the Angler's Footwear to gain that extra action guaranteed. I would still be using his Legendary Hood to give that kill chance, and you can increase the chance that you'll get the kill by using the Shells of Calm Waters to give him that fortune on his turn to hopefully guarantee that you can kill one of the tough opponents on the opponent's side. Weapon-wise, I'm kind of unsure what I'd want, so it's never a bad choice to use the Shark's Maw. This would give your opponent reduction to one of their buffs and then one random enemy as well. It's never a bad choice to use that, but I think it would also be fun to try out the Kraken's Nemesis build with him. And this could attack everybody in one zone. And the way I would kind of use the legendary, a little bit different from using the rare Shark's Maw, is I would just use the Angler's Hood. So this would give him reflect damage to try to discourage some people from trying to attacking him when he's on the front line. And this also gives him one extra action, so you can get that reflect damage and then start attacking people, and then your reflect damage will start dealing even more damage. So that could be a fun combo attack that you could use with Joppa, but again, it's kind of your choice. His armor really doesn't look too differently from his epic, but I think the front with the yellow, I think like yellow pearls or something, I think they look really cool, and then just give him a nice little pop of color, seeing a lot of his other stuff is kind of bland. And then over here, I would love to kind of see what the Sea of Tranquility actually does maxed out, but I'm not sure. Some of the effects that I see right here look kind of cool, and it could go combined really well with his legendary weapon, seeing that it's attacking multiple people. But I'm just not sure if at level 16 what happens, so that could be a hit or miss kind of if you use it or not. One of the items that is always pretty good to use with him is this Restore, as it goes out 75% of the time and you can remove all debuffs from targets. That's never a bad option to use with Joppa over here. Going into Naomlen, this would be pretty fun if everything was maxed out in her. So she has the ability to have one of the highest attack stats if you can build her correctly. So I would still be using the Epic Guild Boots over here, just because I like the extra stealth. I would have to think if everybody is max level 30, if this Apprentice Cap would be able to take opponents out after the injure on their turn. If so, I think that would be a lot more beneficial than using the kill. But I would be switching between these two, just kind of depending on if everything was level 30, how it plays out. I would rather getting the attack off on the opponent on their turn, and then the injure kills them on their turn, so then I get another turn after the opponent dies without them even getting to play. That would just be strategy, but if I find out that doesn't really work because the opponent's stats are a little too high all maxed out, definitely go for the legendary, as this would guarantee a kill, plus or minus the legendary or heroic resistance that you get in battle. Over here, I'd still be using the Disguise Kit to give her stealth, which you need for the kill on the legendary hood to go off. Plus, it also gives her a massive amount of attack boost on her turn. Weapon-wise, I'm unsure kind of what I want to use on her, so using the push may be very beneficial, seeing that if some people kind of like stack their opponents in their row. I know some people do that with Tommus. This could give the 200%, plus it would also 200% on 2 hits, so that'll be 400%, plus another like 50% damage for some pushback damage where there's a wall or another hero. That may be beneficial, but in general, I'm generally just a fan of these Dwarven Blades. I like the way they look, and they have the 75% chance to go off. That's just my preference. I wouldn't recommend the Legendary, only because it's 25% chance to go off. They do have a good effect, but I just don't think the 25% chance is enough to consistently be able to use it. Armor wise, definitely go with the legendary here. This is one of the best looking legendary armor in the game for your heroes. It looks so amazing. And then over here, it would kind of be a toss up. So I would personally experiment with the other things. So my main goal would be to get this off to attack, not kill the opponent in one turn, but have the injured kill them on their turn. I would try to figure out how I can get that to go off by combining some of these. So if I need more attack to get that to happen, I would use this. Or if I don't need that, I would definitely switch to the elusive ring, which kind of in battle, as you see some of the bots using, it's going to restore them. So maybe if she's like attacking Pikel on her first turn, for example, she gets dominated, and then throughout the process before getting to her second turn, somebody randomly hits her, like Shevarith attacks everybody, and then this would restore that, and she'd be full ready to go on her next turn, and also gain some stealth as well. I think one of those two items would definitely be the choice. Going to Nayeli, I don't think I would change too much if everything was maxed out here. I would still be using the rare, so this gives her a chance to heal. I would still probably be using the Paladin's Helmet, which gives Nayeli significant reduction to the amount of damage that she can take with the block. I would also maybe play around with the Guardian's Helmet to give everybody on one row an increase to the defense stat as well. But you just have to play around, kind of figure out what works best for your team. One of the items I would use more, so I preferably like the Sign of Tyre the best because it gives everybody on your team block for 4 turns. But if the stats were exactly the same for Nelly with everything level 30, I would think I'd be using the Judgment of Tyre more, because this can restore all the buffs from all the debuffs from allies and remove any buffs from the enemies. If everything was level 30, I think a lot more people would be using buff builds. So I think this would be vital to use. And it does have a 2-turn cooldown, which is really fast. So I think that over the Sign of Tyre would be a little bit beneficial. But again, just on your playstyle and kind of how your opponents are gearing up as well, would choose pretty much what you want over there. The common is also a pretty good choice, as it lasts for 3 turns and the cooldown is 3 turns. So that's that. Over here, I know a lot of people like to use the halberd because 75% chance to do 120 plus an additional 200% damage. That's 320%. That is really good. I think the highest damage of all of our weapons would be the legendary, which does the 350%, but it's only 50% chance, so as you know, I don't like 50% chance if I can avoid it. I would probably switch more to the Halberd or Swift. So this is doing 250% damage, which is still good, but if opponents start stacking up, then she'll be able to attack both people if they're stacked together in one column. I think this would add another level of sophistication of trying to convince people not to stack up their heroes, because then she'd be able to attack 2 people. But it's also very situational, so you have to find out how people are playing. But I think that's a good option. Or as I'm using now, the Holy Avenger is a great option because it can attack everybody in one row. And it also gives her a great amount of attack boost if it can go off. Armor-wise, definitely boost on that legendary armor. Look at that, those flowy cape parts going back. The armor looks really good. And then going over here, just because it's so overpowered and broken, there's nothing I would recommend more than the Serpentine Owl. The Mist Duration for 3 turns, and it stacks. That is just insanely overpowered and broken, so developer's not going to fix it, so spam it all you want. Moving on to Pikel, he's one of my favorite heroes outside of Saarvin. But the problem with him is a lot of the gear that I like to use is legendary, and as you can see, his stats suffer quite a bit. So if everything was maxed out with him, my build would look like this personally, and this is just how I play. There's a bunch of different ways. So a lot of people are going to be using the common, but I think the rare is actually his best. So this is going to give him block for 3 turns so he can survive a lot longer. And the reason that we're having that block is because we want him to survive long enough so this ointment can keep spamming off and all buffs everywhere get removed. And that is insanely powerful. The other option, people play a little bit more offensive with him, and they use this, which would passively dominate people. I've discussed many times with this community and the developers that I think this duration should either be 1 turn, or when hit the chance is like much lower, like 20% chance. I'm a huge proponent of this item. I recommend that most people don't use it because I think it ruins battle and the whole function of the game. But it's not going to change now, so if you want to use it, go for it. I think more courteously, don't use it. And just start using the legendary ointment. I think overall this is a much funner item to use anyway, and it makes the gameplay a lot smoother and less aggravating for me anyway. Armor item, oh yeah, smack on that legendary. Look how good that looks. I just love how much foliage is on the back. Really adds another level of complexity to his character. And then from here, you definitely will want to use the legendary, give some immunity. The one that I care about most is the dominate. So that's very important. So now you don't have to worry about attacking Pikel on the opponent's side if they do have the dominate ability on. Because now you're protected here for 4 turns and can also be protected from the kill. Those are the 2 major ones. Depending if everything was level 30, what people use, the injure could also be something that you want to worry about, and this could be beneficial as well. But that's the only item that you want to use there. With this build, because we are using the block, this is why I'm going to be using the ring, and this would be able to heal everybody and gain the extra action. So the way I would play him is just move Pikel into the back row on his first turn, and then start healing everybody and just kind of be a nuisance to the opponent. So now they have to decide whether or not they want to take Pikel out right away, or if they want to focus on your other 3 heroes in your front row. Adds a fun little complexity to the game. Depending on how you build them, the Ring of Wood would also be a really good option to get that Death Ward madness. That's just up to your playstyle. You could also use the Rings of Copper to move them into the back row and deal a massive amount of damage to one random enemy. I just don't like that it's a random enemy, so that's generally why I avoid using that. Weapon-wise, I would have to experiment a little bit more. So he's not really going to be a main attacker using this strategy, so I think the Epic Spike Club would just be a good option. So if people do get close, he'll be able to attack everybody, not considering any range. So that could be very useful, seeing if only one person gets close and everybody else stays far away from him. If you do play a little bit closer of a build, I think the Shillelagh would be really cool because it gains 100% reflect damage. And as you've probably seen many times against bots, when the bot has this in battle, it can be absolutely devastating when you attack them and get like a crit off or something. So definitely a bunch of different options to try out over there. And that would be my Pikel build. And we've got 2 heroes left. If everything was maxed, I would definitely love to try out Raika. I've never used her just because I don't think I would ever be able to have enough resources to get her where she would be competitive. But the build that you'd want to use with Raika is use the legendary. And at level 16, this ability is 50% chance she'll gain 100% damage for 3 turns. And she also gains an extra action. And the extra action is absolutely overpowered. I've always wanted developers to change it, but they never did, because it just makes her insanely overpowered. But definitely for now, use the legendary if you have it. And then over here, it's tough. So this could be kind of beneficial in battle, the gaining taunt, and then one opponent gains haste. I just don't like how in the haste, especially in battle, it won't give your turn immediately. Your opponent's still going to get another turn before you haste it. It kind of just changes the order. So in battle, I don't think this is absolutely critical, and especially if she is the last alive. I would think probably more of a counterattack build would be a little bit more beneficial. So you can use the Mark of the Owlbear here. It lasts for 4 turns with a 3-turn cooldown, which is really good and what I like to see. So I would use that. And then I would use the overpowered Arrowbale's Skull. So this is, if you do get your movement off and gain 100% damage, now you're going to be doing extra damage, and then this does 250% damage. So this can almost take out an entire row of opponents in one turn. So that is absolutely crazy. And then weapon-wise, you kind of just have to figure out how you want to play here. I know a lot of people like to use this Mana Chorus Teal because it's going to heal her and makes her very obnoxious to kill. But the way I would try to play her is just move her to get this damage off on the first turn to just deal as much damage as I can. I'm not really too concerned about healing because I'm going to be using the Eon Stone of Regeneration, which gives her a really good chance on her turn just to revive anyway. And she has one of the highest hit points, if not the highest. When everything's level 30, I think her hit point max can get up to like 35,000. So it's not a worry. I don't think she really needs to start focusing on an obnoxious heal build in order to be very effective. So I'd use that. Use her legendary. Be proud of it. Look how good that looks. And then weapon-wise, I would think I would probably use this Boule Claw Spear just because it would give the injure. And that could also add another level of complexity as well. You could also, with the counterattack, use the Yeti Bone Hammer. So this is pretty much going to be doing the Owlbale Skull over there. 50% of the time. With counterattack damage, this could be like you're getting it multiple times. But you just have to experiment and figure out what's best for you. I really want to recommend some of these other weapons. And last is Vajra. So I would have to kind of figure out how I'd want to play with her. At level 16, this gains 100% chance to go off. All enemies in 3 zones are going to be inflicting damage. That's really fun to use, but I don't think if everybody was level 30, this would really be dealing too much damage. It may, depending if you combine it with this Quill of Memory, which will increase her attack for 2 turns if she's hit. That could be an option. I think more conservatively, most people are going to be using the common to gain that extra turn, and then they'll move her into the back row and try to figure out what they want to do from there. For me, it's an option between the Field Handbook, which would command people to attack one opponent, or the Specialist Guide, which has a 4 zone, which is really good and does a lot of damage. You can combine that if she does get hit with the Quill of Memory to gain an insane amount of attack, and this will pretty much guarantee take out anybody with this. Multiple options there. And then if everything over here was level 30, I would have to experiment. So gaining the Fury with this is never a bad option, but I think you could be able to get some good damage off with this. But then I would also consider maybe giving people a counterattack or giving your team a crit chance, and this could help overcome the Nayeli Owl, but giving some people crit. But with the chance only 25%, I think that's a little too low, so I'd probably skip that personally myself. So it'd probably be like that. Weapon-wise, I would kind of be unsure, so I really love using the Staff of Withering because it could restore. The one thing I don't like about this is when you hit Nayeli or Pikel for a chance, with the action of restoring takes place first before you actually do your attack. And I hate that. So if you attack Nayeli, who has the owl, before she even gets her attack, with the whole action of restoring, it's going to give her a miss. So when she actually does her attack, there's a good chance that it'll actually miss. That's one of the things I want developers to change, because I don't think the act of just removing stuff from her counts as dealing an attack or damage to her. So I think the effect of the owl should only come into place when you actually inflict damage. And that this would be a lot more user-friendly against Nayeli, but they haven't done that. They're not going to change it now. So that's my gripes about that, but overall, solid weapon choice over there. but you could also make her a lot more offensive and use the Tentacle Rod, which will deal 150% to all enemies in one zone. Use the legendary armor just because it looks so good. Look at that train on that dress. And then over here, depending on what you're using, the Epic is a really good choice because it can restore every 2 enemies plus herself 50% of the time, which could be really good passively. But I would think I'd probably use the Seal of Insight more because it gives her a good chance to gain an extra action. So if I'm using the Epic Staff, I would probably be using this Restore a little bit more, whereas if I was using the Common, I would be using the Silverhand Seal a little bit more, just because the Common can attack multiple people, which would give this a higher chance to going off. And then she has a bunch of other different options you can do to deal damage on her turn. So, Ludia or Jam City, if you're watching, and for anybody who's made it this far, it would be great if you'd be able to gift everybody the option to get all level 30 stuff to enjoy the final days of this game, or just give us like 1 billion gems and 1 billion gold, where we can just purchase to our heart's content these ruby chests over here. So we can try to get as far as we can before the game ends. But yeah, those are my thoughts and how I think battle would go out and how I would gear up for the final days. But overall, thank you for watching over the years. Thank you for this game, and I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. And out probably for the last time, unless we see some amazing updates in these final days.